Hi, I wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about Engagement 7. Now, Engagement 7, you'll be preparing for your CCNA exam because you're at the end of your third course for your CCNA prep courses. So that was the CSC 2010, CSC 2020, and this is CSC 2030. You're at the end of that course. So at the end of this course, as long as you make a 70% or higher on your Cisco Academy final exams, that is your theory and your hands-on exam, then you would qualify for a voucher for half off of the CCNA certification. So I'm hoping that everyone is planning on pursuing the CCNA certification since you've done all this hard work over the course of the 3 semesters. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that and kind of getting you prepared for that. So for your CCNA exam, what can you expect? Well, for studying, what I would do is use the list of exam topics. Now, if you go to the CCNA website that's on the cisco.com corporate website, you can find all of the exams the Cisco Academy has, and I provided the link here for you. This takes you directly to the 200-301 CCNA exam, which is the current CCNA exam. This provides you with a description of the exam and the exam breakdown. You can actually download that in a PDF format. But if you'll look at this, notice you have 6 different areas that you'll want to study. So you should use this as your study guide. So for Engagement 7, what I have you doing is kind of jump-starting the study process. So you will take each one of these scenarios, which is the, or not scenarios, but list of exam topics. For example, you have network fundamentals, and these are all the things that you would need to know. So for exam 7, I have you focusing on what we've done in the CCNA 3 class, or the CSC 2030 course, which is the Security Fundamentals in Automation and Programming, or Programmability. So notice that Security Fundamentals is 15%, Automation and Programmability is 10%. So what you'll do is copy each of these and you'll research the answers and write some notes. So that is what I would like for you to do to be prepared for the CCNA exam and in order to gain points for your Engagement 7. So these are notes that you're going to use. Like I said, this is a jump start to preparing for the exam. So I just want to take a couple of minutes and talk to you about the exam. Now, I've taken the exam, I think, about 5 different times. So I started preparing this way back in 2000, I believe, when I took the exam. So I've seen it kind of evolve over the years. So I've developed a couple of personal strategies. You probably have your own if you've already taken some of the CCNA certifications. You may have some your own study prep or any of the other certification exams. But if you have not, these are just some things that I would suggest when you're preparing for CCNA. Now there's different resources. You have the course that you've done. You do have access to that. And you can sign up as an alumni. So what you'll do, you may want to do, especially if you're graduating, if you have your Baker College email tied to your Cisco Academy account, once you complete the class and receive credit for it, you may want to adjust your email address. So you may want to put a personal email address. Otherwise, if you don't have access to your Baker College email once you graduate, then you may not have access to the resources as an alumni member, especially if you're doing a password reset or that sort of thing. So that's just one thing that I would recommend. But again, at the end of the semester, you should receive a voucher, and I believe you have about 6 months to use it. So what I would suggest doing is after your class ends, take a couple of months and go through that list of CCNA exam topics that are provided. Make sure you are comfortable with all those. Make yourself some notes. If you want some resources, Now, I believe you have a book similar to this. This is the ICND2 because I couldn't put my hands on the one for this semester, but you may have purchased a book like this, that Wendell Odom, right? Wendell Odom, great author, and he is a Cisco Academy instructor, and this is very, very in-depth. Okay. Can be a little bit intimidating from my personal experience, but what you can do also is there's other resources, so you may find another author. I like Todd Lamley. He produces these, and the one thing I like about Todd is that he's a little bit more laid back, so his material is not quite as dry as what you may find with some of the other books. And so it'll keep you a little bit entertained because he'll interject a little bit of humor here and there just to kind of keep your attention. So Todd's are not quite as in-depth as Wendell Odom's, which is the Cisco certification guide. So what I do sometimes is read through Todd's, and then if I need a little bit more clarification on something, then I may read Wendell Odom's. But you can use whatever method works for you, but I typically spend an entire couple of weeks studying for that, even though I'm teaching it. There's still a lot of things that you're tested on the CCNA exam that may not be used on an everyday basis. Be prepared for all different types of questions. You'll see questions, multiple answer, you'll see multiple choice, you'll see fill in the blank, you'll see some scenario questions that are troubleshooting scenarios. Now, in order to answer the troubleshooting scenarios, you'll be using things like your CDP. Okay, we learned CDP in the last module, Cisco Discovery Protocol. Now, I saw this question, that was one of the things that really kind of threw me a little bit when I was taking one of the exams because I wasn't quite sure how to answer it. It was, you were given a scenario and you had to answer some questions based on what you found in this particular scenario, information that you could only answer, I guess, without giving away too much of the information there, but you could only answer by using show commands. So I found CDP, show CDP, very useful, and so that was one of the different scenarios that you would see. You might see scenarios on, for example, access control lists. So something is not working and why didn't it work? Same thing with NAT. So maybe somebody did not configure NAT correctly. Well, in order to know that it was not configured correctly, you would need to know the commands to configure it. So online classes are great because they give us a lot of flexibility, but one thing that you'll need to remember is that you have access to all those resources when you're going through the class, but when you're sitting for the exam, you have access to nothing. As in, if you have an Apple Watch, you're not allowed to wear your Apple Watch. You're not allowed to wear a hooded sweatshirt. You are not allowed to, I couldn't even take an analog watch. So I took off my Apple Watch, wore an analog watch last year when I recertified, and they wouldn't even allow me to use that. No hats. So yeah, you can't even walk in with a piece of paper. Usually what you do is you're given a write erase board. They also monitor you via the like closed circuit TV or video camera. So you have all those different things. I had that, and then I also had somebody sat in the room with me. So it can make you a little self-conscious. So I'm telling you this just to be prepared. When you go in, you'll want to give yourself plenty of time. The number one reason that a lot of people fail the Cisco exams, and this has been the case over the course of 20 years that I've seen, is that you run out of time. So when you're going through the exam, you want to be conscious of your time, but don't rush through. So when you're looking at the exam, when you open it, you'll answer a couple of questions. To get started with, they'll give you a couple of scenarios just to show you the exam types. It's a tutorial, and you get used to seeing the way the questions are posed to you, I guess would be a correct way of saying that, so that you'll know the exam types. Once you get started, you'll see a counter in your upper right hand corner, and it will count down, okay? And you will have a variety of questions, and they are adaptive. What do I mean by adaptive? They will adapt based on your answer. So if it sees that you're answering questions a certain way, or that you're having trouble with a certain area, it could adapt the questions based on that. There's a huge test bank on these questions. So you can expect to see between 40 and 60 questions during this 2-hour time period. It's 120 minutes, so that's what you'll see in your counter in the upper right-hand corner. So as you answer each question, you want to read it carefully. One of the other things that often causes people issues is that they don't read it carefully. So when you're reading the question, examine it, read it all the way through, because if you read the first part of the question and skip to the answer, you could get it incorrect because there's one part of the answer that, or one part of the question that would significantly change your answer. So you'll also want to read it twice, because for example, in the midterm exam, for my CSE 2010 class, I posted a question about the TCP/IP model and what happens at a particular layer. But a lot of people interpreted that as the OSI model, but they're not the same. The layers are named with different names. So pay attention to small things like that. That will help you. Also, pay attention, especially when referring to the OSI model. One thing that will help you is the wording. So if you know you're in data encapsulation, for example, so that at the transport layer, it breaks data into segments. Layer 3, okay, network layer breaks data into packets. Layer 2 breaks data into frames, and then bits at your physical layer. So that when you're looking at a definition, if it is giving you the definition and it looks like it would be a layer 4 answer, but they throw the word frames in it, then that would not be correct, okay? Because layer 2 is referring to frames, layer 4 would refer to segments. So make sure that if they want layer 3 information, that you choose the one that has packets represented as the answer, as opposed to frames represented as the answer. So those are just a few things that I usually pass along to students. So as you're going through answering the questions, make sure you read it, make sure you read all the answers fully. If you don't know, you can make a great educated guess based on what you do know, and you can filter out the answers that you know are not correct. I'll be honest, it is difficult every time I take the exam, because again, there's a lot of things that you wouldn't use on a day-to-day basis. And in the last exam, there was a lot more of the automation and programmability and some other concepts that I was not familiar with, but I was able to make better educated guesses because I was a little more solid in some of the other content and the other answers that were there. So it helped me filter out the answers that were not correct. So you can always do that too. Take a deep breath. Try not to rush through. If you get nervous, sometimes it's easier to go too quick. But try to go through each question, read it, because when you answer each question and click submit, you are not allowed to return. So it's not like a lot of other certification exams where you can go through and revisit a question. You can't mark a question and go to it later. Once you answer it, that is it. And then you move forward. So just be aware of your time so that you don't run out towards the end. Use the time where you need to on some of the troubleshooting, but multiple choice, you should be able to move through a little bit quicker on those. If you can memorize some things like memorizing your data encapsulation process, memorizing your OSI model, if you know how to subnet in your head without relying on a calculator or writing something down on paper, that will help you out a lot. You'll see a lot of errors in, say, an ACL because the wildcard mask is correct if you happen to know your subnetting. You'll also know that maybe an address was configured incorrectly because they put the wrong subnet mask because you know how to subnet. So take these time savers where you can get them. These are things you can commit to memory, the subnetting and the OSI model and your data encapsulation process and some of your other commands. So practice each of those. So I hope it's a little bit helpful to you, and make sure you use this opportunity to not only get your engagement exercise points, but to start preparing for the CCNA exam so that you can be successful in obtaining that certification, because that certification will help in addition to some work experience that you may have or your 4-year degree. Sorry, I'm used to teaching the 2-year setting, so that's typically what I would refer to for my students. But in addition to your degree and experience, having the certification proves that you do have that knowledge and that you are trainable. Okay, so I wish you all the best in your engagement exercise and finishing up all your classes during this 8-week class. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.